Bueno, muy buenos días y
Okay, so good
bienvenidos al primer
morning,
seminario
everyone,
de
and
la
welcome to the first
serie Ciudades Más
seminar
Productivas y
of the
Seguras en América
series
Latina y el
of
Caribe.
More
Mi
Productive
nombre
and
es
Safe
María
Cities in
Camila
Latin
Uribe, soy
America and the
coordinadora
Caribbean.
del
I'm
Grupo
Maria
Ciudades del BID y
Canuila
estaré
Uribe. I'm the
moderando el
coordinator
seminario de
of the
hoy.
Cities Network of the
Hoy
IDB, and I
abordaremos
will
un
be
tema
coordinating
clave,
today's seminar.
la
And today we
reconversión
will be
territorial
addressing a
como
key
base para el desarrollo
topic,
urbano
territorial
sostenible e
reconversion
inclusivo
as a
de la
basis for
región.
sustainable
Este
urban development that
seminario
is inclusive in the
lo
region. And this
haremos hoy
seminar
en español.
will be held
Como
today
siempre,
in
tenemos interpretación
Spanish.
simultánea
As
disponible en
always, we
inglés
have
y
simultaneous
portugués.
interpretation available in
Este
English and
seminario
Portuguese.
será en español con
This seminar will be
interpretación
in
en
Spanish
inglés y
with
portugués.
interpretation
This webinar will be
in
in English
English
and
and
we have
Portuguese.
interpretation in English, Spanish and Portuguese. Por favor, dejen sus preguntas en la sección de
Please
Q&A.
leave your questions
La
in the
grabación, como
Q&A
siempre, la tendremos disponible
box, and
en
the
el canal de
recording will be
YouTube
available
del
in
BID.
the YouTube
La red
channel of
conecta
the
más de
IDB.
250 ciudades de
The
la
network
región,
connects over
promoviendo
250 cities
intercambio de
in the region,
soluciones
promoting
urbanas
an
y
exchange
herramientas de
of urban
gestión para las
solutions
ciudades,
and tools to
fortaleciendo el
manage
liderazgo
cities and
local y las
strengthening
capacidades técnicas
local
y
leadership and the
haciendo
technical
alianzas
capacities
con
and
diferentes
creating
actores del sector
alliances with
público,
different
privado, la
stakeholders of
academia,
the public, private
otras
sectors, the
instituciones
academia,
financieras.
and other
Nuestro
financial
objetivo es
institutions.
acompañar a los
Our
gobiernos locales en
objective
la
is to
construcción de ciudades
support the
más
local governments
sostenibles,
in the
inclusivas y
constructions of more
productivas.
sustainable, inclusive, and productive
Esta es
cities.
la primera sección de
And
la
this is the first
serie Ciudades
session
más
of the
productivas y
series that's
seguras en
called
América
More
Latina y el
Productive and
Caribe.
Safer Cities in Latin America and
Tendremos,
the Caribbean.
además de la sesión de
We will
hoy,
have, additionally
una
to
sesión el
today's
17
session,
de
we will
junio
have
donde
a
hablaremos de
session
seguridad
on June
ciudadana
17th when we will be
y
talking
el
about
25 de
citizen
junio
security, and
hablaremos de
in
la
on
formación
June
laboral
25th
en
we'll be talking
ciudades.
about
También
labor training
pueden
in cities, and then
registrarse
also
para estos nuevos
you
seminarios a
can register
través
for
de los
these
links del
new
chat.
seminars through
Además de
the
esta
chat
serie,
links.
en los meses de agosto y septiembre
Additionally to this
tendremos
series in August and
la nueva
September,
serie
we will be
enfocada a ciudades más
having the new
resilientes,
series
donde
focused on
hablaremos
more resilient
de
cities, where we are
resiliencia, de
going to be talking
riesgos
about
y desastres en
resiliency,
ciudades y también
risks, and
en soluciones
disasters in
basadas en
cities,
naturaleza.
and also
Pero
in
bueno,
nature-based solutions.
hoy estamos aquí para hablar de
But
reconversión
today we are
territorial.
here
¿Y
to
por qué
talk about
hablamos de
territorial
reconversión territorial?
reconversion. And why do we
América
talk about
Latina enfrenta
territorial
una triple
reconversion?
brecha
Latin America is
que limita
facing
su
a triple
capacidad de
gap
transformación
that
productiva.
limits
Para el
its
2030
productive
se
transformation
estima que
capacity.
la
For
región
2030,
deberá
it
aumentar
is
en un
estimated that the region
70%
will
la
have to
inversión en
increase by
infraestructura urbana para que
70%
podamos
the investment in urban
garantizar
infrastructure so that we can
conectividad,
guarantee
servicios, vivienda
connectivity,
y mano de obra.
services,
La
housing,
inversión en
among
investigación y
others.
desarrollo sigue
And
siendo
the
inferior
investment
al
in research and
1%
development
del
is
Producto
still
Interno Bruto
below
de los
1% of the
países, que es muy
um,
por debajo del promedio de los
GDP of the
países de
countries,
la
which is way
OECD.
below the average of the
Y
countries of
también
the
solo el
OECD. And also,
16%
only
de la población accede
16%
a la
of the
educación terciaria
population
y más del 50%
accesses
de
to
los adultos carece de
tertiary
competencias
education,
básicas
and
como
over
matemática
50% of adults does
y
not have
comprensión lectora.
basic skills like
Estas brechas
math and
impactan
reading comprehension. And
especialmente a
these
los
gaps
territorios
impact
que están
especially the
transitando hacia nuevos
territories that
modelos
are
productivos,
going through
limitando su capacidad de
towards new
diversificar la
productive models,
economía, atraer
limiting
la
their capacity
inversión,
to
generar
diversify
empleo
economy and attract investment and
y
generate
salir de la
jobs
brecha de ingreso medio.
and get
Este
out of the
seminario de
middle
hoy busca
income segment.
precisamente
And today's
abordar
seminar
estos
seeks
desafíos
to
a través de
address
modelos
these challenges
replicables y buenas
through
prácticas.
replicable models and good practices.
Esta conversación que hoy
This
tendremos surge
conversation
del
that we will
encuentro
be
de
having
autoridades
today
regionales y
comes up
locales
from a meeting
que fue
of regional and
realizado
local
en Punta
authorities that
Arenas,
was
en
held in
Chile.
Punta
Vemos en el
Arenas in
mapa dónde queda
Chile.
Punta Arenas
You
en el
can
sur
look
del
at the map
continente.
where Punta Arenas is located at the
Y
south of
tenemos
the
tres pilares
continent, where we will
fundamentales para
identify three
desarrollar
fundamental
reconversión
pillars
territorial.
to advance in
Primero,
territorial
la
reconversion.
planificación
First,
territorial estratégica.
territorial
Segundo,
planning that is
el tema de
strategic.
ciencia, tecnología e
Second,
innovación. Y
science,
tercero,
technology, and innovation.
formación
And
laboral
third,
adaptada a los nuevos
um,
sectores. Para
training
contextualizar
adapted to the new
esta
sectors. And to
experiencia, tenemos
contextualize
un video
this
síntesis
experience, we have
en el
a
que
synthesis video
vamos a
where
dejar
we will
además en el
be
chat y
um,
también
that we
vamos
will
a
be
compartir
leaving
con
also in the
ustedes
chat box, and we will
síntesis
also
de
be
este
sharing with
encuentro
you
del
the
que
synthesis
acabo de
document
mencionar
of this
y
gathering that I
contamos
just
los
mentioned.
principales
And there
hallazgos
is a
que
blog with the
tenemos.
main
Así que
findings that
veamos
we
un muy
have.
breve video que
So
resume
let's look at a very
este
quick
encuentro.
video that summarizes this gathering.
Saludamos al encuentro del Banco
We want
Interamericano
to
y autoridades
invite
locales de
you to the
Latinoamérica y
meeting
el
of
Caribe.
the
Más de
IDB of
40
the local
autoridades junto
authorities of
con
America
directivos
and
nacionales
Latin America
hemos
and the
podido
Caribbean. Over 40
compartir
authorities
distintas
to
experiencias
different experiences for support and joint work. For the IDB, it's important to have this work with the cities for two reasons. One, with this network of cities, we make sure that between the cities they collaborate, that they exchange experiences, they exchange lessons learned, and thus be able to transfer knowledge along all the cities of Latin America and the Caribbean. Second, the cities are very important to reach the objectives of the institutional strategy of IDB. And being here with different leaders and local mayors and governors that already know the experience, people who are expert in planning, is an opportunity that we have as governors to be able to structure around innovation, the productive diversification, technologies, innovation, recognizing the efforts that have been done in other territories where the experience has been positive, so that we can apply them also in our territories and in our problems for projects to be better and have a greater social impact. And our final goal based on this meeting is to really change reality so that we can achieve sustainable development based on technology and innovation.
Similar issues in terms of our development in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is the only forum where it is that we can all sit down together and formally come together and find solutions to a lot of the issues that are pending, social issues that we all face.
Avanzar en el desarrollo de los territorios con sus
Advancing in the
capacidades.
development of the territories with their capacities, with the way of sharing their knowledge, and especially pointing towards investment in public investment in strategic sectors right now, like those linked to the energy transition, digitalization, research, are key to generate wealth and especially to distribute it in a fairer way.
The meeting has been the case study that we're looking at and how we can apply new strategies within that particular case. I mean, you're developing a new city based on a case study and learning from other cities.
Me llevo muchas herramientas para trabajar en Mérida. Una de ellas
I'm taking back a lot of tools to work in Mérida, and one is planning. When there's planning, when there's a basis, when there's information, when we also invest in science, in research, we're able to have better results. And of course, inclusion of society, that society embraces the task that we have. And it's a lot of information that will help me in my actions as the person responsible for Mérida. And all of this is very important for the International Development Bank because it helps us reduce poverty, improve the living conditions of the population, and create all the innovations that we need for Latin America and the Caribbean be a dynamic and strong region every day.
Bueno, pues hoy tenemos el gusto de contar con nuestra representante del banco en Chile, quien nos recibió,
We have a
nos apoyó,
representative of a
nos
bank in
lideró
Chile
en
who
el
received
trabajo
us and
que
supported us
hicimos
and led the work that we
en Punta
did
Arenas, y entonces
in
quisiera darle
Punta
la más cordial
Arenas, and I
bienvenida
would
a
like
Florencia,
to
para las
welcome
palabras de apertura.
Florencia
Florencia, gracias
for
por
our
estar acá
opening
con
remarks.
nosotros.
Florencia, thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you so much, Maria Camila. Good morning, everyone. It's so beautiful. What a beautiful and inspiring video about our moments in Punta Arenas, in the Chilean Antarctica, in the southern extreme of this beautiful continent called Latin America. Kind greetings from the IDB. It's a pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar and on territorial reconversion, which is part of the cycle of more productive and safe cities in Latin America and the Caribbean, organized by the network of cities of the bank that she leads. And as many of you know, the IDB, not only in Chile, but also in the region, has supported the implementation of processes of decentralization for several years. And this support includes aspects such as the strengthening of capacities, the development of diverse instruments of public policy, and also the funding of policies and programs and projects for their effective implementation. And today we will be continuing with the dialogue that we started in this beautiful Punta Arenas on March 2024 in the context of the mayor's meeting and the annual assembly of governors of the IDB group that took place here in Chile. And right now, as Maria Camila was saying, and the video said, we had the opportunity to share with different authorities, subnational authorities, international experts, and IDB specialists, and think about how to advance towards a territorial conversion network that comprehensively includes territorial planning, productive innovation, and training, labor training. Thank you so much for being here. And we deeply believe in the transforming power of the local government. You, local governments, are at the forefront of the everyday challenges, and you're also the main characters of change. And we know that each city and each territory has an identity and a unique potential and a capacity for innovation that deserves to be recognized and strengthened. And that's what we are here for. That's why spaces like today we consider are very valuable. And our mission as IDB is not just to fund projects, but also to generate knowledge, encourage dialogue, support the construction of local capacities. We want to help you with concrete tools that allow you to face challenges and face the future with decision and purpose. This is part of a broader conversation that we started in Magallanes. And as I said before, we think it's important to continue it, even though if it's hybridly online. In Magallanes, we think we reflect a lot as a team on how to build the development of the territory and how to strengthen the role of the national government, how to transform aspirations into concrete policies. And I want to take advantage and thank Governor Fleas and the people from the Magallanes region. One of his collaborators will be helping us today. Thank you for your hospitality and for showing us how from the south we can reach with vision and strategic sense and commitment, and very strongly thinking about this central topic, which is how to reconvert, how to think about ourselves in a different manner. When we talk about reconversion, we don't only talk about economic or productive reconversion, we talk about social inclusion of new public and private alliances and planning with territorial focus and ensuring that the benefits of development reach all corners and to all the people in a territory, not thinking about a reconversion we own by itself. We also need productive innovation as we considered in Magallanes. These are not only technical issues, but it's also important to integrate them as opportunities and look at this as concrete opportunities to learn about successful experiences, share common challenges, and specifically strengthen our institutions and improve our outcomes. From the IDB group, as I said before, we know of the potential of this. That's why we want to thank you for your presence, for your space, and we wish a very productive session to everyone. Back to you, Maria Camila. Thank you. Thank you so much, Florencia. Thank you for your remarks and for your support. So let's listen to our participants and the inspiring experiences that we are going to be listening to. We are going to have the experience of Juan Espadas, former mayor of Sevilla and senator of the Kingdom of Spain, to tell us about Sevilla with a comprehensive model of urban sustainable development. And we'll also have, as Florencia is saying, Axel Gonzalez, head of the Planning and Regional Development Division, to tell us from the regional government of Magallanes and the Chilean Antarctica about the strategy that they have on energy reconversion. We will also have a panel for conversations with the ones who led these three conversations in Punta Arenas to listen about these matters. We're going to listen to Fernando Toro, Senior Specialist in Housing and Urban Development of IDB, Blanca Torrico, which is a specialist in Science Development and Innovation of the IDB, and Veronica Alaimo, leader
tenemos
specialist
una
in social
super
protection
conversación.
and
La idea
labor
es que
markets
podamos
of the
transmitir
IDB.
este conocimiento, estas conversaciones que se
The
tuvieron
idea is for us to be
en
able
Punta
to
Arenas y
transmit this
podérselas
knowledge
extender
that
a
we had in
todos.
Punta
Ya
Arenas and be
hemos
able to extend it to
compartido
everyone.
los links, los
We have
documentos,
already
la
shared the
información donde
links,
está para que si
the
ustedes tienen
documents, the
mayor curiosidad
information.
y quieren conocer un poco más
And
sobre
so if
esto.
you're
Vamos
curious, if you
entonces,
feel
antes de
curious and you
empezar,
want to learn about this,
a nuestro
and
Mentimeter,
before this, we're
como es
going
costumbre,
to
les pedimos que por
use our
favor escaneen
Mentimeter
este código
as we normally
para
do. We ask you to scan
responder
this
dos
code
preguntas.
to
Vamos con la primera pregunta.
answer these two questions. The first
Les damos
question,
un segundito de tiempo para que puedan
we'll
escanearla
give you a second so you can
y ahí
scan it,
entran al Mentimeter.
and then you'll go into the
Y la
Mentimeter.
primera pregunta es qué palabra para
And the
cada
first
uno de
question
ustedes
is what word
desde
for
sus
each one of
ciudades
you from
representa
your
mejor
cities
la reconversión territorial.
better
En
represents
una
territorial
palabra vamos a
reconversion.
tratar de ver
In a
esa nube
single
de
word, we're
palabras
going to
de
try
qué
to
quiere
look at
decir
this
reconversión
word
territorial
cloud. What does
en cada
territorial
uno de nuestros
reconversion mean
territorios.
in each one of the territories?
Así que los invitamos a
So
escribir,
we
escanear
invite you to scan, to
y poner la
write,
palabra que les parece que
and write
representa
down the
mejor.
words that you feel represents better.
Reutilizar, diversificación, renovación, resiliencia,
Innovation,
transformación.
planning, resiliency, transformation.
Bueno, vamos entonces a me
Okay.
quedo con planificación, sostenibilidad,
Keep
resiliencia,
planning,
transformación.
sustainability, resiliency, transformation.
Vamos entonces a la segunda
We
pregunta.
are going to the second question now.
Está muy interesante, hay mucha gente votando.
It's very interesting.
Y
There's a
es
lot
qué
of people
aspecto
voting.
considera
And
cada
it's
uno de
what
ustedes que es más
aspect does
relevante
each one of
para
you consider
avanzar
is more
en la
relevant
reconversión
to
territorial.
move forward
Ya
in
vimos que ambas
territorial
dijeron
reconversion? We
planificación,
saw that
inversión,
many of you said
innovación,
planning, investment, innovation,
formación laboral, coordinación.
labor
¿Cuáles son los
training,
temas que son
coordination.
claves
What are the issues
para
that are
avanzar en esta
key
reconversión territorial?
to advance in this
Desde
territorial
su territorio,
reconversion?
desde su ciudad, ¿cuál
From
creen que
your
es lo más
territory, from
importante?
your city, which one do you think is the most important one?
Planeación,
Planning,
inversión,
investment,
coordinación. Muy bien.
coordination.
Bueno, pues creo que con eso
Okay, I think that with that in
hemos
mind,
tenido muchas
we've had
votaciones todavía,
a lot of
pero con
votes,
eso en mente creo que
but with this in
es
mind,
un buen principio, Axel,
I think
para
it's
que
it's a great
comencemos con
start, Axel,
Magallanes,
for us to
que
start with
como ya mencionó
Magallanes,
hace un rato
that,
Florencia,
as
es una
Florencia
región que
mentioned,
está
is a region that
liderando una
is
transición.
leading a
Vamos
transition.
a escuchar
We
a
are going
Axel
to be
González, que es el
hearing
jefe de la
from
División de
Axel
Planificación
Gonzalez,
y
the
Desarrollo
head
Regional.
of the
Y
Planning
después de
and
Axel,
Regional
vamos
Development
a viajar
Division.
hasta Sevilla
And after
para
Axel,
oír el
we will
ejemplo
be
de integración
traveling
y
to
urbanismo.
Sevilla
Pero vamos
to hear
entonces,
about the integration and urbanism
Axel,
example.
a tu
So,
breve
Axel,
presentación, por favor.
let's go to
Muy
your short
buenas tardes a
presentation.
todos
Thank
y
you.
todos.
Good afternoon,
Quisiera saber
everyone.
si se me escucha bien.
I'd like to know if you can hear me
Perfectamente.
Muchas
Adelante.
perfectly
gracias.
well.
Bueno,
Yes,
un
thank you.
saludo desde Magallanes, desde el extremo
Greetings from
sur del
Magallanes,
continente
from
y
the
también de
extreme
Chile para
south
todos
of the
ustedes.
continent and of Chile for all of you.
Fue muy importante la actividad que se realizó acá en Magallanes, así que
It was a
entiendo
very important
que
activity that was
existe
done.
también
So
interés por desarrollar los temas
we know that there's a lot of
que
interest
se
to
conversaron
resolve
ahí. Un saludo de nuestro
the
gobernador, don
issues
Jorge Fríes, que hoy
that were
día,
talked
como
about
ustedes
there.
saben, esta es la región más grande
Greetings from our governor,
de
Jorge
Chile y
Piel,
por lo
that,
tanto se
as you know,
encuentra
this
desplegado en
is the
algún punto
biggest
de la
region of
región
Chile.
atendiendo
Therefore,
las necesidades
he is
de
deployed somewhere in the
comunidad.
region tending to the
Voy a
needs
hacer
of
paso a la
our
presentación
community.
para
I
poco
will
el tiempo que nos
be
queda
sharing
asignado.
my presentation
Y
to be
quisiera
able
saber si
to
se ve
stay
bien
within my
ahí.
assigned time, and I'd like to know if you can see my presentation.
¿Estás compartiendo la pantalla?
Are
Sí,
you sharing your
No
screen?
la vemos.
We cannot see it.
déjame visualizar algo. Ahora sí. ¿Ahora sí?
Ahí viene, sí. Ya lo puedes poner en modo
There.
presentación.
Yes. There. Now you can put it in presentation mode.
Ahí sí.
There.
Ya la vemos, Axel.
Perfecto.
Now we see it, Axel.
Viene
Okay,
video, así
perfect.
que pediría que
There's a video
tengamos un poco
coming.
de paciencia.
So just bear with me for a second.
Bueno, principalmente nuestra
Okay,
presentación
so
está enfocada
mainly
en las
our
estrategias de
presentation is
desarrollo.
focused on the
En el inicio del
development
mundo, nosotros
strategies.
tratamos siempre de mencionar que
In
desde
the start of
Magallanes
the
se
world,
inicia
we
todo
always
un
try to mention
proceso
that
desde
Magallanes
el
is where
punto
the
de
world
vista
starts
geográfico, pero
from the
estamos
geographical point of view,
en
but
una
we
posición austral
are
y
in
nosotros
this
queremos en
southern,
el
extreme
fondo
southern position,
poder
and we
generar
want
una
to be able to
región en la cual
generate
sea modelo de
a
planificación
region
y desarrollo
that is
regional
a
para todo
model of
nuestro país.
planning and development regionally for all our country.
Mencionar algunos temas
And I want to
importantes
mention a
y
few
es que
important
Magallanes
things, and it's that Magallanes
concentra tiene el
focuses
67%, es la región más grande de Chile
67%. It's the
y el
largest region of Chile,
67%
and
de su superficie
67%
está bajo
of
alguna
its
medida de protección
surface
oficial
is
por
under
parte
some sort of
del Estado de
official
Chile en
protection by
el
the
Sistema
Chilean
Nacional de la
state,
Silvestre
under
Protegida.
the
Y esto
national system of
principalmente
protected
por
areas.
la
And this
amplia
mainly
riqueza
is because of the
ecosistémica que tiene
broad
nuestra región, la
ecosystemic
cual
wealth of our
alberga
region
algunos de los
that
ecosistemas más
brings
protegidos de
together
la
some of the
Tierra,
most
entre ellos
protective
los bosques
ecosystems in the
subantárticos
world,
que están presentes
like
en
the
nuestro bioma.
subantarctic forests that are
También
present in
un
Magallanes.
23% de
Also,
las aguas
23% of the waters
pertenecientes o que le corresponden a nuestro país
that
en el extremo
correspond
sur
to our country
están
in the
bajo también
extreme
alguna
south
categoría de
are
protección.
also
Esto
under a protection
principalmente
category,
debido a que
and this
presentan una
mainly due to the fact
biodiversidad
that they have
altamente sensible
um,
y
highly
son
sensitive
un
biodiversity,
corredor o un
and
paso hacia
it's
todo
a
el
corridor
flujo de
towards
migratorio y también el
the entire
flujo de
migration flow and
flora y
also
fauna que existe en la Antártica.
the
Por lo
wildlife
tanto,
flow that
tenemos una
exists in
región
Antarctica.
que
Therefore, we
tiene
have a
una
region that
amplia riqueza
has a
natural
broad
y
natural
ecosistémica a
wealth
su vez.
and ecosystemic wealth also.
Mencionar que respecto a la Antártica,
I also
nosotros
want to
somos la región de
mention
Magallanes
about
y de la
Antarctica
Antártica
that
chilena.
we are the
Tenemos
Magallanes
una
and Chilean
importante
Antarctica
presencia
region,
en
and
esta
we have
lámina. Se puede
an
ver,
important
en
presence. And
detalle
here you can see in this
las líneas
slide,
son más pequeñas, pero por la cantidad de instalaciones que tenemos hoy en día
because
en
of
la
the amount of
península
facilities that
antártica,
we have right now in the Antarctica
se ve de esta forma.
Peninsula.
Nosotros tenemos
That's
una serie
the
de bases
form that
en la
it takes. We only
Antártica,
have a series of bases
como por ejemplo
in
la
Antarctica,
base
like
Julio
for
Cordero,
example, the
la
Julio
base
Cordero
Guillermo
Base,
Humán,
um,
la base
the
González Videla, entre otras.
González
Hay
Videla
una serie de
Base, among
refugios.
others,
También
and a
poseemos
series of
un
refugees
aeródromo,
also.
base
We
Martos,
have an
y
airdrome
una
also,
serie
and a series
instalaciones
of
que durante
facilities
años han servido como
that for years have
soporte
served as a
logístico
support
y
for
científico a
logistics
la
and
diversidad de
science
países que están
for
presentes en
the
este
universities of
territorio
countries that
de
are
paz.
present in this territory.
Nosotros consideramos que Magallanes
We
es la
consider that
puerta de entrada
Magallanes
actualmente
is the
del territorio
point of entry
antártico, siendo uno de
to
los
the
5 hubs que
Antarctic
existen
territory,
o
and
una de las 5
undoubtedly the
puertas que
5 hubs that
existen
exist, one of
a
the
nivel
five
mundial y por lo
doors that exist
tanto
worldwide.
la
And
región de Magallanes,
therefore,
especialmente Punta Arenas, Puerto Natales obviamente
especially
y también
Punta
Puerto
Arenas,
William,
Puerto Natales, and also Puerto Vila,
tienen una importante
have an
correlación con
important correlation
misiones científicas
with
que
scientific
operan hoy en
missions
día en la
that operate
Antártica.
nowadays in Antarctica.
También mencionar que
I also want to
Chile
mention
en general es un país que
that
nosotros
Chile in
definimos
general is a country
como
that we define
tricontinental. Poseemos
as a
territorio en el continente
continental
americano,
So we have territory in the American continent. We have our presence in Antarctica. We also have an important presence in Oceania through the Fernandez Bay. So this makes our sea territory be very broad, having a special link towards the Pacific Ocean, but also to the Atlantic Ocean, considering that in our region we also have the Magallanes Strait, which is a vital maritime connection pathway, and nowadays it's very important in worldwide trade and logistics. I also want to tell you that Chile looks towards the Pacific Ocean. We have oceanic location, especially linked to the Pacific Ocean, with very important relations with all the countries that share the basin of the Pacific Ocean. And within this, we have the important commercial relationship that we have with the countries of Asia Pacific. This is signed in an agreement that exists through and we also have a very recent example where we are going to have a direct connection of fiber optic of high technology from Australia to Chile through a underwater cable. We also want to mention that we have important economic diversification in our region. Mainly, we have a cattle growing history from mid 1800 with sheep being Magallanes, one of the main providers of this kind of cattle in Europe at the beginning of 1900s. We also have an important touristic vocation. We have the Torres del Paine National Park and a series of other parks that are present in the Chilean Patagonia, like Francisco Coloani. And also, our economic diversification is associated to hydrocarbons. In the mid or at the beginning of the 60s, there were important reserves of oil found, which made it be a hard time for extraction of oil, and nowadays it's diversified to gas. And we also have important trade because Magallanes has the condition of a free trade zone, which has generated a very important dynamic for the consumption of the Patagonia. We have important connections with Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and other countries, having as pivot axis the free trade zone. And something that has been also very important also in the economic matrix has been fishing, mainly associated to open sea fishing, where we have had an important increase of this industry in our region. These are the traditional axes of our economic diversification, but we're also looking towards the future. And this is related to the strong use of renewable energies that have an important amount of projects under evaluation of environmental impact in our country, in our region, with over 15 projects that can generate or have the perspective of being able to generate in Magallanes a center of green hydrogen for the world. And we have also been putting our efforts in generating a productive sector associated to big data because of our strategic position. It's very important for many companies and also for many countries to be able to have big data available when they have a project under development. And then finally, last but not least, we have logistics and tourism in the Antarctica. As I mentioned, we are one of the entry doors. We have regularly we have the visit to be able to reach multiple scientific missions and many military missions that come through for their logistics via Magallanes. We are also the closest point of the continent for emergencies or for any type of support that any city in Antarctica has. And in the region of Magallanes, we've been specializing in this type of service. I'd like to also mention one thing that's at the focus of this presentation and of this session, which is centralization. Chile, until like 200 years ago, had a political system that was very centralized, where the decisions in general for all the regions of the country were made in the capital, in Santiago, over 3,000 kilometers away. And 4 years ago, we started with a decentralization process that has become very strong, and it has put focus on the regional governments, local governments associated to the election of governors. And this is a process that generates a decentralization that is important for the different people in our country, and that has a special emphasis in the more extreme or farther out regions like Magallanes. We have to consider that Magallanes nowadays does not have a direct connection through Chile. It has a connection through air and through sea, but there is no land connection. And this is one of the examples of our situations in our region. There are still certain challenges related mainly to having a greater amount of local attributions and also of amounts associated to investment. But this is a process that, as I was mentioning before, is irreversible. And every day we have more and more attributions to be able to manage our territory, in which we know the needs and the priorities better than others. I also want to mention, I would like to talk a little bit about the planning instruments. And within the regional governments, it was also evident the need to have planning instruments that are much more updated and much better, that can put a focus on territorial development that is local, regional, mainly. And that's why in 2020, we generated the strategy, the regional strategy for the development of Magallanes and the Chilean Antarctica. And this development strategy set the basis for the main guidelines of our development. Mainly, it's based on the human social pillars, the dimension of integrated territories, the economic and productive dimension, and the dimension associated to a climate refugee. After having done an important territorial analysis, we consider that these are the 4 dimensions that will drive us to reach to the development that we have traced for 2030. Also, together with the regional development strategy, we have a series of planning instruments that are very important. Axel, we have 1 minute left. Perfect. Magallanes has over 8,000 islands, therefore, this is very important for us. And we're also planning through the different regulating plans of each one of the communes to have an intercommune regulating plan to be able to have complete national.
Hemos generado una serie de convenios de programación, que es muy importante. Los gobiernos regionales firman convenios de cooperación con los diferentes sectores, los sectores más grandes del establishment del gobierno central, para poder impulsar iniciativas centradas en nuestras necesidades. Estos convenios son vivienda, salud, obras públicas y empresas públicas.
Public enterprise.
Algunos de los ejemplos de estas iniciativas son Camino Jolen Berrio Pérez, un nuevo camino que une dos provincias que estaban completamente separadas y tenían una sola conectividad. También la Biblioteca y Archivo Regional para recuperar la memoria de la región y el Centro Subantártico de Puerto William, que también es un laboratorio a las puertas de la Antártica, en donde se genera ciencia e investigación atingente de la Antártica en la isla de Navarino, la última ciudad del continente americano. Tenemos un plan de zona extrema importantísimo, en donde tenemos más de 2.4 billones de pesos programados en 10 años para inversión en las diferentes brechas detectadas en cada uno de los territorios. Tenemos el centro en donde, por ejemplo, está proyectada la construcción del Centro Antártico Internacional, una proyección de más de 150 millones de dólares que albergará a la ciencia antártica de todo el mundo y especialmente la de Chile. Y también estamos proyectando la construcción de un centro aeroespacial y teledetección de Magallanes, esto por la creciente necesidad de contar con sistemas aeroespaciales actualizados en nuestro país. Voy a ir pasando un poco más rápido. Nosotros también tenemos la visión puesta en ser una región conectada al mundo y para esto el estrecho de Magallanes se consolida como un sistema portuario integral con más de 8 iniciativas, más de 7 iniciativas asociadas a puertos, además de la construcción del puerto el muelle de Bahía Fields en la Antártica, que se encuentra adjudicado en este momento y comenzará próximamente su construcción. Y será el puente de conexión entre la Antártica y la región de Magallanes. Finalmente, mencionar que nosotros esperamos ser una región conectada al mundo, con la inversión importantísima en diferentes aeropuertos y aeródromos puestos en toda nuestra región, incluso en la Antártica con el aeródromo Teniente Rodolfo March. Así que eso es lo que les quería presentar. Muchas gracias por su atención y bueno, quedamos atentos a todas las consultas que nos puedan hacer. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Axel. Creo que ha sido una súper viaje por Magallanes para quienes nos acompañan el día de hoy. Vamos entonces ahora a movernos por el océano, desde el estrecho de Magallanes hasta Sevilla. Así que adelante, Juan. Juan nos va a contar un poco de la experiencia, de su experiencia como exalcalde de Sevilla y actual senador. Adelante, Juan.
Muy buenas tardes y bueno, en primer lugar, creo que me escucháis bien. Buenas tardes desde Madrid. En este caso no tengo la oportunidad de compartir con vosotros. Fue una experiencia única en Punta Arenas, pero esta vídeo y esta reunión nos va a permitir volver a retomar el contacto. Por ser prácticos y muy directos, ¿no? María Camila, esto es casi una continuación de la sesión de trabajo que tuvimos en Punta Arenas y por tanto os intento concretar de nuevo en mi experiencia como alcalde de Sevilla, cómo llevamos a cabo el objetivo de este webinar, este proceso de reconversión territorial, con qué metodología fundamentalmente. En primer lugar, yo creo que es importante efectivamente, y creo que lo decía Alex en su intervención, magnífica, en primer lugar, tener claro que hay que alinear estrategias entre los distintos niveles de la organización administrativa. Estamos hablando de desarrollar en un lugar en donde ya hay un proceso previo de descentralización, ya hay capacidades, ya hay una autonomía local y recursos suficientes. Hay que tener la capacidad de poder alinear tus objetivos de desarrollo territorial en tu ámbito con los objetivos que se hayan planteado a escala regional o escala estatal o incluso en el ámbito de la experiencia de Sevilla, de Andalucía, de España, a nivel europeo. Y veréis por qué os lo planteo, ¿no? Se trata de alinear estrategias, en primer lugar, analizando cuáles son las fortalezas de nuestro capital territorial. Esta es la cuestión. Y para eso debemos definir la escala. Alex nos ha hablado de una escala grande, la región de Magallanes. Yo os hablo de una escala pequeña, la de una ciudad, la ciudad de Sevilla, al sur de España, una ciudad con 700.000 habitantes, que marca su estrategia territorial en un área metropolitana de 1,5 millones de habitantes. Por tanto, lo primero sería efectivamente tener claro que vamos a analizar las fortalezas de nuestro capital territorial en ese área de 1,5 millones de habitantes, con varias municipalidades, en donde la capital, Sevilla, ejerce y radia una influencia importante, pero también se nutre de los recursos que tienen esas municipalidades para conformar, digamos, un área más potente. ¿Por qué es importante? Porque tendrá más capacidad, como hemos tenido, de captar el interés de la inversión productiva y, por tanto, también podrá desarrollar una estrategia mucho más ambiciosa de desarrollo y de diversificación y reconversión territorial. Cuando decías antes, María Camila, ¿con qué palabra podríamos definir esto, ¿no? Aparecía planificación, sin duda, fundamental, innovación, formación. Se trata al final de que miremos nuestro territorio con una nueva visión, ¿no? Con una nueva mirada para intentar tener nuevas oportunidades sobre un mismo territorio. Por tanto, con esa finalidad, lo primero sería desarrollar lo que nosotros hicimos fue alinear nuestra estrategia local con la que entonces se denominaba la estrategia de especialización inteligente de la Unión Europea. Una estrategia denominada RIS3, luego fue RIS4, que de alguna manera planteaba a escala europea en espacios o áreas metropolitanas como procesos del tipo de los que desde el BID nos estáis planteando, procesos de reconversión territorial, ¿no? Por tanto, alineamos nuestra estrategia local con una estrategia de escala europea, pero también en donde se hacía mucho hincapié en decir, bueno, ¿qué es, por ejemplo, la diversificación productiva? Es evidente que territorios que han apostado por un monocultivo productivo, en muchos casos y en la historia son ejemplos de fracasos y de problemas laborales, de situaciones complicadas, ¿no? Es evidente que la diversificación es un elemento clave, pero lo primero es, en una ciudad, por ejemplo, como Sevilla, en donde tradicionalmente hemos tenido sectores muy potentes, como puede ser el turismo, el sector servicio. Bueno, lo primero sería decir sobre nuestros sectores tradicionales debemos innovar, debemos introducir estrategias, en este caso, para ser aún más atractivos, poder generar aún más riqueza. No se trata de sustituir sectores, salvo que por la situación económica u otro, porque también se generaría, digamos, frustración en las personas que están dedicadas a eso y perderíamos también oportunidades. Se trataría, en primer lugar, de ver en qué otros sectores de actividad productiva podemos apoyar nuestra economía, podemos diversificar nuestra capacidad de generación de riqueza. Eso hicimos. Y fijaros, a la hora de buscar nuevas potencialidades, nuevos sectores, además de los tradicionales, identificamos dos que nos podían permitir claramente dar un salto cualitativo. Por ejemplo, el primero de ellos, os va a llamar la atención, fue el sector aeroespacial. Bueno, ¿y esto como Sevilla? ¿Por qué el sector aeroespacial? Bueno, pues sencillamente porque Sevilla tiene una tradición de navegación aérea en el conjunto del Estado español de muchos años. Y por tanto también tenía capacitación, me refiero a facultades de ingeniería que han desarrollado muy buenos profesionales en esa materia. Por tanto, había una base sobre la que poder plantear por qué no ser más ambiciosos a la hora de que este sector, el sector aeronáutico al principio y luego el sector aeroespacial actualmente, pudiera ser o pudiera generar un clúster de empresas que pudieran, en este caso, radicar e invertir en un espacio de nuestro territorio metropolitano. Ese fue el proyecto Aerópolis, un proyecto en el que Airbus, que si identificáis el sector aeroespacial en Europa, es, digamos, un proyecto de escala europea, pues define un eje de 3 ciudades en Europa en donde, de alguna manera, se desarrolla el potencial del sector aeroespacial europeo. Una de esas 3 ciudades en Europa, en 3 países, una de ellas es Sevilla, en España. Y es como consecuencia de una decisión de la administración, fundamentalmente regional, de ubicar en el territorio de Andalucía, un territorio con más de 8,5 millones de habitantes, un lugar donde especializarse productivamente en esto, y la estrategia local, en este caso en Sevilla, poner los recursos y los medios para alinearse con esa estrategia regional. No hubiéramos podido conseguir nada si esa estrategia regional a su vez no tuviese un peso en la estrategia estatal y en la estrategia europea. Por tanto, desde lo local, a mí como alcalde me tocó pues hacer de comercial, de vendedor de mi ciudad. Es decir, buscar razones a nivel europeo, a nivel español, para que se invirtiera y se desarrollara y promocionara ese área para ese sector, por tanto, para esa actividad productiva. Fijaros, este tipo de estrategias, cuando se alinean bien y concilian intereses, nos ha llevado a que actualmente Sevilla sea la sede de la Agencia Española del Espacio, por ejemplo, decisión que se tomó hace tan solo 3 años, justo cuando yo terminaba ya la alcaldía, como sabéis, ahora soy portavoz en el Senado, pero fue el trabajo de casi 7 años para ir fortaleciendo dentro de un sector lo que podía ser el que se ubicara en España las decisiones, las empresas y, por tanto, también la formación de las personas que quisieran dedicarse a eso como el lugar. En el caso de Francia, por ejemplo, es Toulouse, para que nos hagamos una idea. Bueno, pues Toulouse en España sería Sevilla desde el punto de vista del sector aeronáutico. Por tanto, esta es una primera decisión de diversificación productiva enormemente importante. Se puede tomar una decisión en donde quieras conseguir que un sector productivo sea fuerte si no te apoyas en la academia, si no te apoyas en tu centro de investigación. No. Por tanto, tuvimos que complementar claramente una apuesta por reforzar nuestros centros de investigación y las capacidades de nuestras universidades, las capacidades también en relación con la formación profesional. ¿Por qué? Porque al final no podíamos estar intentando atraer empresas que luego no tuvieran mano de obra disponible, fundamentalmente en nuestro ámbito territorial, donde queríamos desarrollar nuevas oportunidades. Por tanto, como veis, voy avanzando en el sentido de ir concretando cómo, una vez fijado el objetivo, una vez analizadas las potencialidades, buscamos las alianzas. Las alianzas a veces son con otras administraciones, desde el punto de vista de la coordinación multinivel, con la búsqueda de inversiones estratégicas, en donde evidentemente tienes que conseguir financiación estatal o incluso poder acceder a financiación europea. En la actualidad, los denominados planes de recuperación económica que se diseñaron desde la Unión Europea después del COVID han sido fundamentales para el desarrollo económico de nuestro país. Por eso decía al principio, alinear estrategias y aprovechar las coyunturas. Nosotros hemos aprovechado para poder financiar con esos fondos, que son fondos europeos, que se transfieren al Estado, también la capacidad para que el Estado nos dé mayor financiación en proyectos estratégicos, claro. Es financiación finalista. Significa que se trata de analizar cuáles son los déficits o las debilidades de nuestro desarrollo productivo y fortalecerlas. Por ejemplo, esos fondos para fortalecer estos sectores productivos en Andalucía y en el caso de Sevilla han ido a lo que hemos denominado la transición energética, es decir, potenciar nuestra capacidad de producir energía, producir fuentes energéticas renovables, reducir nuestra dependencia de los combustibles fósiles y acelerar los procesos de descarbonización tanto en el ámbito de la ciudad como del punto de vista industrial. Bueno, pues hemos alineado, por tanto, una estrategia europea que tiene recursos y financiación con una estrategia local como la de la ciudad de Sevilla y su entorno metropolitano industrial, ¿no? Por tanto, alianzas, efectivamente, alianzas públicas, también alianzas privadas. Yo siempre en esto digo que no podríamos hacer un proceso de este tipo si no generamos una comunidad de intereses entre la administración, con sus niveles, las empresas, el círculo o el ámbito empresarial y desde luego la universidad.
Between the administration with their levels and the companies and also from universities. So it's a key helix. And we have to be able to advance in the process. And also in this intervention to close, because I want to be careful with time, no process designed in a blackboard or in a PowerPoint presentation will work if we're not able to involve society from the beginning and generate a participatory process to be the main characters. So in Sevilla, we'd like to say that there was a previous mayor that explained it very well, and he said, Sevilla has to be the city of people. People have to be at the center of politics and at the center of strategies. And this means that we have to be able, from schools to universities and the work centers, to make everybody be co-responsible and to know, because they're explained and they participate on what we're doing, what is our dream for the next 10 years in our territorial environment, or else we can generate tensions, conflict, or just There can be people that believe that are not part of the process and are not able to connect. So, especially nowadays with a society in a very accelerated digitalization process, where the new skills, the new abilities demand a very important effort on part of the administrations and a very large participation on part of society. I'll stay there, Maria Camila, so I can help for this to be fluent, and I will be ready for you. Yes, thank you, Juan. We'll be back because I think that both Axel and yourself have mentioned very interesting elements for our conversation. And I'd like to also bring to the table three experts, the three experts of the IDB that are here today, Fernando, Blanca, Veronica, so that you can also turn on your cameras and we can have a conversation together. So, Fernando, let's start. There's a lot of pressure on planning. I think it's been part of the conversation from the beginning, from the Mentimeter and everything that was said by everyone. I would like to start, Fernando, with you and for you to tell us a little bit about how you think from this conversation and from the things that we've been working on and from the dialogue in Punta Arenas, how can urban planning become this productive reconversion tool? We have a lot of faith and we are really trying to make this not only a regulatory requirement, but also a real element to be able to do this. And also, we'd like you to tell us a little bit about which strategies allow linking together this planning with investments in services and participation in the municipalities that probably have lesser capacities. We've heard about Juan talking from Sevilla, but also our reality from Latin America. So we'd love to hear from you, Fernando. Thank you so much, Maria Camila. And thank you to the authorities from Sevilla and the region of Magallanes. It was a very impactful gathering because of all the realities of different scales, different cultures, different contexts, socio-demographic contexts as well that we addressed. And this is what was interesting. I think that in lesser or greater extent, depending on the regulatory framework, the local governments can transform this into a strategic tool for productive reconversion, especially when we put a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable aspect. And this, in this gathering in 2025, was precisely what was highlighted, that this transformation requires going from a regulatory focus to participatory processes, especially results-based. And therefore, an effective urban planning needs to start from territorial diagnosis that identify productive capacities, social gaps, and environmental risks as a base. And based on this, we can design instruments like master plans and codes and or urban planning that are adaptive and diversification strategies in areas with existing infrastructure, not starting from scratch, but doing a diagnosis with what we already have. And this was especially important in the cases of strategic investment and territorial governance. This involves strengthening intermunicipality authorities like development councils or participate or encourage citizen participation. So when we talk about this, there has to be a notion of a territory in its complexity and a complete level of the areas that share certain interests and dynamics and ecosystemic services. And I think here the experience of Curitiba in Brazil that uses AI for urban planning shows how technology can boost all of these processes. And I also think that this must also facilitate the reconversion of soil and the creation into new productive areas. So we have what we already, we know what we already have, we improve it, but we also see what we have around us, how we can keep advancing from social and territorial sustainability that is coherent, integrating society and sustainable infrastructure and basic services. And in this sense, something that came up was that the public-private alliances and task incentives are key tools to attract investment and improve local economy. And I think that finally, and one thing that is mentioned a lot is the local leadership. So subnational governments need to have a proactive role in the coordination of public, private, social sector, sharing a view of development, and this is considering all the developments in an urban planning for urban planning to become a catalyzer of productive reconversion, able to create jobs, reduce inequality, and of course, strengthen territorial resiliency. And this in regards to the first question that Emma was doing. And in the second one on how the strategies are able to link or territorial planning with basic services and participation. I think that smaller municipalities and with lesser capacities, with basic services and with an adaptive and integrated strategy, as I was saying before. First, I'd say that the diverse stakeholders agreed in the meeting that it's key to strengthen institutional strength with participation platforms, and these structures allow aligning local priorities with local policies, because we not only have to diagnose with all the local stakeholders, but we have to go at intermediate level, like the case of Chile, where we have the central and regional and municipality level, and with all the intersector. And that way it's easier and more coherent to talk about investments based on the territory's needs. And second, we have to take advantage of planning instruments like master plans and having a more flexible instrument and territorial diagnoses that are robust. This also allows identifying this area not only for growth and diversification for housing, but also priority areas for investment. How are we going to reconvert these uses? How are we going to generate buffers for protection? How are we going to advance with mobility infrastructure and with the industry optimizing resources, improving efficiency, and of course, thinking about social equity? And third, I think that public-private coordination, as I was saying before, is key. So we have to deal with administrative issues without, of course, leaving aside the social environmental protection, but maybe finding the critical nodes that we can improve in generating alliances with the universities and local companies. And this came up a lot also. How, when we think about jobs, we think about reconversion of curriculums and university careers that are being provided, so that this local population can be trained to face the new challenges and keep attracting investment. And like the case of Niterói in Brazil and Mérida in Mexico, I believe that this is interesting to look at the technological aspects in lower scale. And citizen participation needs to be transversal, and we need to include planning and execution. When we're thinking about the city participatorily, when we're executing, what's the role of the sector in participating in these projects that strengthen legitimacy, and what's planning and what is being considered for the future, and improve social cohesion, which is an aspect that provides sustainability to all these changes. And the focus of co-creation, or however we want to conceptualize it, needs to be exercised with practical activities, demonstrating the role of this learning between peers and how this is applied in the future of our territories. And we also need to expand technical and financial capacities of local governments in a lot of contexts. There's more decentralized contexts, some that are less decentralized. There's other national governments that have more or less faculties to be able to advance with the reform and investments, but there's others that don't. There's others that are still starting with their centralization process, and they also need to get support from international cooperation and from learning. We also talked a lot about how they can talk to other universities from other parts of the world with the multilateral institutions, and that's what we're also here for, and the cities network that brings us together to discuss these matters and how we update technical training programs
Yo creo que
and
en
other
eso engloba un
levels.
poco las dos respuestas que me hiciste, María
And
Camila, para no
that's
quitarte más tiempo.
where I
No,
bring
gracias,
together the
Fernando.
two
Además es que
responses, the two
estábamos
questions.
muy centrados en la planeación
And we
urbana
were
y
also
nos
very
diste
focused on urban planning, and you
una
gave us
aproximación que es bastante
an
integral,
approximation that is
que de
pretty
hecho creo ha sido
comprehensive,
parte de lo que
that I
hemos dicho
believe has been
del
part of
lado
what we have
de
also
Magallanes y de
heard about
Sevilla.
today
Y
from
es
Magallanes
como,
and
o sea,
Sevilla. And
esto es mucho más que un sector,
this
esto es
is
mucho más que un
much
solo
more than a
tema, esto es
sector.
mucho
This is
más
much
que
more than one single topic.
el trabajo al que
This is
estamos
much more than the
acostumbrados.
work that we're
El gran
used to.
desafío tiene que
And the
ver
great
con la
challenge is
coordinación entre
related
todos, no
to
solamente
coordination among
de
all
un
of us, not only
trabajo
of a work
multinivel, como lo
that is
mencionó
multi-level,
Juan,
as
sino también
Juan
con la
was mentioning, but
comunidad.
also with the
Has
community.
mencionado
And
muchos temas
you have
relacionados
mentioned a
con
lot of issues related to
capacitación, con los
training,
nuevos sectores, con el mercado
to
laboral, y tal vez eso
the
me
new
llevaría
sectors, and with the labor
a
market.
saltar a Verónica
And
para
this
preguntarte,
leads me
Verónica,
to
¿qué
ask
de las cosas que
Veronica,
escuchaste, del trabajo que se hizo en Punta Arenas,
from the things that you heard,
y de poder acercar un poco más esta
from the work,
responsabilidad de las ciudades, de los
from being
gobiernos locales,
able
de los
to bring
gobiernos
this
regionales?
responsibility of the cities and
¿Cómo
local governments
podemos
closer,
anticipar
and the regional
cambios
governments, and how
y
can we
adaptarnos
anticipate
más rápido
changes
a nuevos
and
sectores?
adapt
Entonces, a mí me
quickly to
gustaría un
other
poco,
sectors?
Fernando nos mencionó
So Fernando
temas de
mentioned
capacitación laboral, de la
matters on
importancia que
labor
tenía
training and the importance that
la necesidad de adaptar estos nuevos
of the
sectores.
need to adapt these
¿Cuál
new
es
sectors.
tu visión al respecto?
What is your vision about this?
Hola, bueno, gracias María Camila y gracias a
Okay,
todos por la
thank you, Maria
invitación y bueno,
Camila, and thank you
un
everyone
placer
for the
estar acá después
invitation.
de
It's great to be
buen momento
back
que
here
pasamos
after the
en
fun
Punta
times we
Arenas, que
had
fue muy interesante.
in Punta Arenas.
Y
That was
sí,
very
creo
interesting.
que
And
recojo lo
yes,
que
I
dijo Fernando y
think
lo que
that
dijiste
I
tú.
gather what Fernando was saying or what you were
En
saying,
cuanto a que primero creo que fue muy interesante la experiencia de eso, ¿no? De sentarnos
where
en una
there
misma
was a very
mesa, una
interesting
población de 1000
experience
habitantes con una
to
población
sit
de
down at a
millones de
table
habitantes
with
y
a
recordarnos
population of
igual de gobiernos
1,000 in
locales, no
in a
estamos
table with a
hablando
population of
quizás de
millions. And when we're talking about
unique,
local
¿no? Entonces
governments, we're
también
not
creo
talking
que
about something that's
para por ahí,
unique.
para los que venimos
We're
justamente
talking
de
about
un
something
sector
where,
diferente
for those of
al
us who come
de
from a
vivienda
different
y
sector,
urbanismo, creo que es
from
importante tenerlo en
housing and
cuenta.
urban planning, it's important to have this in mind.
Y también eso, ¿no? Que creo que la multisectorialidad está en todo, como que en todas
And I
las
believe
tres charlas que tuvimos
multisectorality is
siempre salían
included in
como los
everything. All
tres
the
temas
three
juntos,
talks
no
that
había
we
manera
had,
de separar uno del otro.
we had the three
Entonces creo que
topics
eso también
together.
lo hace muy interesante. Específicamente
And
con
that's very
respecto
interesting.
a cómo los gobiernos locales pueden anticipar la
And
demanda,
how the local
ahí
governments
creo que
can
también
anticipate the
es
demand.
multinivel. Hoy en
And
día,
I think this is
justamente
multi-level.
lo que llama la prospección
And
laboral, y en el
nowadays, what
caso
we
de
call
Chile, por
labor
ejemplo, está liderado
prospection, and in the
por
case
la
of Chile,
Secretaría del
this is
Trabajo.
led by the
No es,
Secretary of
no
Labor.
hay una única herramienta, es
There
necesario
isn't
combinar
a
distintas
single
herramientas
tool.
porque
It's
cada herramienta nos
necessary
aporta algo
to
diferente, ¿no?
combine
Entonces tenemos las
each tool
encuestas,
because
que suelen
they
ser
each give us
representativas,
different
que
things.
son
So we have
costosas,
surveys
que
which are
se
representative, but they're
tardan mucho tiempo,
expensive
mundo
and
muy dinámico como el que
they're
vivimos
done
hoy,
not very
y con la
often in a
tecnología
very
nos
dynamic
permite, por
world like the
ejemplo,
one we're
hacer
living
un análisis
in
de
today, and with the
necesidades
technology
a
that
través
allows us
de
to do
vacantes
an
en el mercado laboral,
analysis
¿no? Pero
of
esas dos herramientas
what
que
are
son
the
muy
demands
importantes en
through
general
the
se tienden a hacer
labor
a nivel
market
nacional, aunque pueden tener
spots.
una
But these
bajada
two tools
local,
that are very important in general
por
tend
temas
to
de
be done
costos, de escala,
nationally,
de
but they can have
conveniencia hacerlo
a
así,
local
pero
aspect also
también se
because of costs.
complementan
It's convenient to
justamente
do it this way, but
con
this is also
el
complemented
diálogo con el
precisely
sector privado, con el diálogo
with a
con lo
dialogue
que
with
está
the private
pasando
sector, with a
en el
dialogue with
lugar.
what's
Si uno
happening
quisiera hacer un curso
on site. And if we
una
would
malla de
like to
capacitación o
do
algo, lo que se suele hacer
a
es armar una
training,
mesa
what we
técnica
tend to
del
do is
sector,
to build a
convocar
technical
a todos,
work table on the sector
sector privado,
and bring
academia,
the private sector,
incluso a veces
academia,
trabajadores que también tienen una mirada
and
distinta.
workers
Entonces ahí es
that
donde el gobierno
also
local
have
yo
a
creo que es
view
donde tiene
to
más que ganar. Crear
contribute. And
esos
that's
niveles
where
de
the
diálogo
local
técnico en el
government
local que sea bien
needs to
aterrizado.
help
Entonces,
creating a
uso
technical
encuestas,
dialogue
uso los
locally,
datos que me están diciendo
the
de
use of
portales de vacantes, pero
surveys
lo
and the
bajo a la
data.
realidad
But I bring
territorial
this
y bueno, y
down
tiene que
to
darse
the
esa
territorial view.
capacidad de, a partir
Um,
de ese análisis de la demanda,
and
ir pensando
we
cómo
have to
van a
look
ser
at
los
the
procesos de
analysis of the
capacitación, pero
demand
también ahí mirar el lado de la
and look at
oferta.
how the training is going to be,
Después,
but also
son dos
look
sectores
at the
productivos en dos
offer, the
regiones
supply.
diferentes que piden lo mismo, pero la oferta que está disponible no es la
And
misma.
there's
Entonces,
also
la
two
respuesta
different productive sectors, but maybe the supply that's available is not the same, so the response will not be the same. And we have to, we can have people that are almost ready with a short course, they can be ready. There's another area where the effort of labor reconversion can be much bigger, where we can have to put more resources, more time to be able to achieve this change and be able to really have people ready to get better jobs. So clearly, I know that the local government needs to be first in line and push this dialogue and push this public-private dialogue and multi-level that allows this. I don't know if I spoke very fast, if that allows what each territory needs. Yes, I think that the challenges are huge, and we are mentioning things that we saw in all the panels in Punta Arena, and that is key on the role of how we can support and help think about how to do this from the territories. And I'd like to go to science, technology, and innovation with Blanca and listen a little bit about from your vision, what you saw, what you heard. What is the role of the local governments to help build the innovation ecosystems that have a low investment in research and development, and how to bring together these ecosystems and link them to the markets, to sustainability, to like, there are a lot of challenges, but what is the way? What is the path? How can the cities work on a strategy for this? Okay, good morning, Maria Camila. Thank you so much for your invitation. And from our experience in Punta Arena, we needed to have this space with you to do a wrap up with all of us who participated in such an important event where the housing division also let us go into the innovation issues in this dialogue. In the Magallanes region, we talked a lot about the difference that exists between the different stakeholders there. There weren't mayors or governor, there were mayors' offices or governor's offices that were more development and had a little bit better financial weight. And to not only to think about covering the minimum expenses, but also focusing in new things like research, development, innovation, the support to entrepreneurship, the support to innovation ecosystems. And there we have like different aspects. And one thing that's very important that was talked about is the experiences that you mentioned before, that Fernando mentioned, the experience of Nitero in Brazil or Merida in Mexico, that showed what was the potential that the creation of technological poles linked to universities and companies could have, thinking about the fact that each mayor's office or governor's office has a primary productive matrix that we would have to keep pushing. And why not thinking about linking universities and companies? And there we can generate technology and innovation hubs. And these spaces encourage knowledge transfer, public-private collaboration, and also incubate startups. That is very important to generate innovation. Local governments can also generate this environment for innovation through not only tax incentives, but also through the digitalization of public services to improve efficiency and transparency, or creation of new local companies, and support to deploy connectivity networks. And also, why not, creating specific mechanisms like the public purchase of innovation. In one of the presentations that we had in Magallanes, we were talking about the case of some countries like Peru and Chile that implemented the public purchase of innovation, knowing that the public sector is the biggest buyer at country level in most countries. And public contracting as an engine for innovation is very important because the state acts as a first initial client of local technological solutions, which makes it be able to drive demand and job generation, and also the generation of innovation and the generation of alliances between companies and the academia. Every everything that I was mentioning before. And this can also be a very good example of how we can implement this, but also bringing together what Veronica was saying in her previous intervention. Many of this also means the generation of technological skills from very early ages, um, like STEM education in schools, or also creating incubators or public funds that can contribute projects with local impact. And to answer to your question of what else can be done from the subnational part to be able to connect the ecosystems with strategic markets, I would also like to talk about what can be the direct support to companies, SMEs, startups, through the participation in fairs, commercial missions, or local innovation networks. This is done a lot in Chile. In Chile, we have Cercotec, for example. We have a great implementation of Cercotec from the business centers that are in all the regions. We have over 60 implemented in the country, and that these support with the creation of companies and advisory to companies, but they also specify their support based on what is productive in each region. And this makes them be able to promote sector clusters, sectors with comparative advantages like agroindustry, health, clean energy, etc., that can position themselves in the global chains centrally. I think this is super important. This is something that we could encourage locally, but also thinking about sustainability and also all the goals of all the countries of reaching 2030 or 2050 with their goals met, starting, for example, to work with circular economy or green innovation that organically holds companies and universities to be able to think about innovative ideas, to be able to adopt their business models in the reduction of waste or the reuse of resources, for example. Or also thinking about technological solutions for an energy transition, sustainable mobility, or water management. It's not because we have the representatives here, Punta Arena and Magallanes, and everything is being done with green hydrogen is very powerful because not only they're generating a new sector in the region, but this sector will have a positive impact on the energy transition, on innovation, on the creation of advanced human capital, but also in supporting the country and taking it towards sustainability. So I think this can all be summarized and what was mentioned in Punta Arenas, and this summarizes what we talked in Punta Arenas at my
Muchas
work table.
gracias, Blanca. Muchísimas gracias. Creo
Thank
que
you,
me
Blanca.
gustaría aprovechar
Thank you so
también
much. I
a
think
Juan
I'd
y
like to
Axel
take
para hacerles algunas
advantage of Juan
preguntas.
and Axel to ask you a few
Y si fuera
questions.
posible, me gustaría
And if
empezar
it's possible, I'd like to
también por
ask
Juan.
to start with Juan.
Y es,
And
Juan,
it's
desde tu experiencia y
Juan,
también
from
ya con
your
el conocimiento
experience
de
and
todo lo que has
also with the
escuchado y de la
knowledge of
evolución hacia
everything
América
that
Latina
you've heard and
y el Caribe, ¿qué aprendizajes crees que podrían ser útiles de cómo
all of these matters
integrar
in
la
Latin
planificación
America
urbana, la innovación, la formación laboral
and the
en
Caribbean
estos procesos que tenemos también en la
that you've
región
heard
sobre
about in these
reconversión
processes that we
territorial?
have in the region
Desde
on
tu
territorial
experiencia, ya
reconversion? From
mencionaste
your
varios
experience,
elementos que
you already
fueron
mentioned
claves en el
several elements
proceso
that were
de
key
Sevilla
in
y
the
en la visión
process
que
of
tienes tú,
Sevilla
pero me gustaría
and your
que
vision, but I would like
resumieras un poco
you
cuáles son
to
estos
summarize a
conceptos
bit
y para las
what are
ciudades
the
que nos están
concepts,
oyendo,
and for
como
the
cuáles son
cities
esos
that are
principales
hearing us,
mensajes.
like what are the main
Efectivamente, yo
messages?
creo que lo situaría
Yes,
en el
I
punto
think
en
I
el
would
que
place this in
la
the point in
estrategia
which
fundamentalmente de
the
formación
strategy
de la
fundamentally for
sociedad
training
se
of
adapte a
society
nuestras previsiones
should adapt
fundamentalmente
to
para los
our
próximos años
provisions
en esos sectores
fundamentally for
que
the next
queremos
few years
potenciar, en esos sectores en
in
los
the
que queremos
sectors
generar
that we
riqueza y
want to
economía en
boost,
los
in the
próximos años.
sectors
Hay
that
que
where
alinear
we want to
ambas
generate
cuestiones. Para
wealth
eso
and
es por eso
economy in
es
the next few years.
necesario
We have to
trabajar
align
entre
both things.
distintas
So that's why
administraciones
it's
porque,
necessary
por
to
ejemplo, el
work
gobierno regional tiene las
in
competencias en
different
materia de educativo
administrations because, for example, the
y las
regional government
universidades,
has
por ejemplo, pues tienen su
competency in
capacidad y
educational matters, and
autonomía
universities, for
en sus
example,
propios
have
diseños
their skills
de,
and
de
autonomy
titulación. Por tanto,
in their own
una
design.
administración local que no tiene esa
Therefore,
competencia
a
tiene
local
que sentarse a
administration
la
that
mesa y
doesn't have
generar
this
un
competency
equipo
needs to sit
con
down
esas
at the
otras
table
administraciones
and generate a
en
team
cuestiones
with these
clave y
other
diversas, por ejemplo, la
administrations in
educación o
key
la
issues like,
formación,
for
y
example,
sentar
education
en
or
el otro lado
training,
de la mesa a
and
quienes luego van
at the other side of the table, having those who are going to be demanding from the companies in the final years, both of training in university and professional training. So it's fundamental that when we design where we want to grow or how we want to grow, we are sitting down at the table with all of us who have a competency or a decision capacity to guide these developments and then resources to fund this. And therefore, the work for planning needs to be shared, and public participation for knowledge of what we're doing, and the contributions of proposals need to be permanent. We cannot do everything and then tell about it at the end. This needs to be from the beginning. And we have to guide this because the decisions to know what kind of human resources we're going to be able to count on, we have to make these decisions at least 5 to 7 years before. We have to now be training the labor demand that is going to be urgent in 5 years, or else we will have a gap or we'll have a problem that is unresolved. Therefore, planning and generating future scenarios, we need to be able to see the future in the midterm to be able to anticipate and make the decisions. Therefore, I insist, I think that here we've seen very good examples of how to strengthen these alliances, and we are at a moment that is especially attractive within all these difficulties internationally and the uncertainties that we're also always going to have, and instabilities in different areas of the territory more than others. But I think we have to focus on our closest environment. I absolutely agree that from the local site, we have greater capacity to lead processes of territorial reconversion, but we need to do this with conscience, knowing that we have to look for nearby partners. So we are not designing territorial reconversion process only looking at ourselves. We have to see what your neighboring municipality is doing. How do you integrate your process into a regional process? Because it's the only way for you to be able to be successful and get support on others. And the scale and the size matters in this case. And although we're talking about small municipalities, we need to be coherent, knowing that the territory is much larger than its administrative limits. Natural resources, for example, in the case of Sevilla, the industrial soil isn't within the urban center of Sevilla, but it's in its limiting municipality. So this municipality with its city hall needs to be able to organize this territorial development project. And together we're going to have more capacity because we'll be more population, but also more capacity of influence to sit down with a regional government and define a project and look for funding. That's why, based on each territory, we'll find a reality. But in the case of what I'm telling you about, our scale needs to be the metropolitan scale. In the rural aspect, we need to define local communities that share a reality, for example, from their natural patrimonies, and demand infrastructure, and how a small municipality somewhere will be able to have a capacity to convince an administration to invest in a road infrastructure to connect with a specific technological pole. It's evident that we need to bring together our strength to be able to state broader territorial strategies. And territorially speaking, the strategic planning needs to keep in mind the dimensions that are more correct. They need to be rich, diverse. We need to introduce a lot of elements to it. I insist it should not be monocrops or a single orientation. I think that we've seen here very clear examples on how to state these types of alliances and how to do this on site. You've done this before, and Blanca has expressed this very clearly. For example, expertise of favoring the creation of projects and poles that are technological, where there's an expertise, which in many cases can have problems of generational relay. So we have areas where there's natural resources, and the problem is that We need to find youth that can or want to follow this sector. Therefore, this work is also very important. It's very important. It's not just about deviating the population or the youth towards a sector. Why? Because sectors in the territory guarantee population and opportunity. We need to have a mix, but that need to be very attractive. So I am authentically in love with planning, with territorial planning, with looking at the realities in the territory and putting a focus on people. And Maria Camila, you mentioned at the beginning inclusion a lot, inclusive strategies. This is very important. Strategies need to fix the population to the territory and give them reasons to stay there, giving them more opportunities, having more wealth, and then obviously administrations need to know how to provide opportunities for everyone and distribute fairly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Juan. Thank you for this last part, because I think this has been a mix of several of the things that have been said today. And the path is complex, the one that we have to go down, and we have to integrate all the elements that everybody has mentioned. Before we end, I would like to hand the floor to Axel from locally and from Magallanes, so that you could tell us a little bit about where you started from, which were the challenges and the challenges that you are also facing, but also what have been the opportunities. We have heard today from good cases, good practices, but also about the importance of coordinating between the different sectors. And I think that the issue of planning becomes something that's not just from the local aspect, from the territory, but also looking to our neighbors, to our environment, multi-sectoral coordination. I'd like to close today to hear what were the challenges that you were facing, but also what have been the opportunities that have come up in this entire process of implementation
Sí,
of the
bueno,
Magallanes
me gusta
strategy.
principalmente mencionar, dar un contexto histórico, porque en el fondo cuando uno no tiene
Yes, I
contexto
want to give a
histórico de la
historical context,
situación de un
because
territorio es
when we
difícil
don't have a historical
poner
context about a territory, it's
contexto
difficult
después de desarrollo o
to
planificación.
put the
Mencionar que,
context
como bien
in
te
development
decía
and planning. And I want to
hace un
mention that,
rato, los gobiernos
as I
locales,
was saying, local
los gobiernos
governments
regionales en Chile son de corta
and
data,
regional
tienen
governments in Chile
cerca de 8 años.
are very recent.
Por lo
They have
tanto,
close to
o
they're
un
close
poco
to eight
menos,
years old.
4 o 5 años.
Therefore, or
Eso ha
less, 4 or
hecho
5
sí
years.
que nosotros,
This has
y el
made
gobernador que
us,
hoy en día es don Jorge
and the
Fir, como
government
fue
that
sus
we have
funciones en
today, which
Magallanes,
is
él
Jorge Fir
estuvo en un
here in
periodo de
Magallanes.
intendente, fue intendente de la
He
región de
was an
Magallanes, llega
intendant
a
of
un
the
cargo de delegación
Magallanes
de la
region,
presidencia y
and it
luego
was a
asumió como
position that was
gobernador
delegated by the presidency, and then he
regional
took
en
office
un
as a
periodo y
governor,
ahora está en un
regional
segundo
governor,
periodo.
for one
¿Por qué
term,
saco esta
and then he
colación?
is doing
Porque
a second term.
efectivamente,
Why do I bring this up?
cuando
Because
hay políticas públicas y
when there
orientaciones de
are
políticas
public
públicas asociadas a
policies and
planificaciones,
public
es muy
policies
importante
guidelines
que estas políticas
associated, it's
públicas
very
tengan
important for these public
trazabilidad en el
policies
tiempo
to
y
have
puedan tener
traceability
coherencia en
in
el tiempo
time
de acuerdo a lo
and
que,
have
a lo que se
coherence
planificó.
in
La
time.
región de Magallanes hace
And the region
unos
of
años,
Magallanes,
y yo
a few
digo
years ago,
las oportunidades que tuvimos o
and
los
the
desafíos que
opportunities that
tenemos
we
aún,
had, or
porque
the
todavía son desafíos
challenges that we still
vigentes,
have, because
tienen que ver con
there are still current
ampliar la
challenges, are
matriz
related
productiva de nuestra
to
región, una matriz
expanding
productiva que está muy
the
basada
productive matrix in our region,
en recursos naturales.
which
Por lo
is based
tanto,
on
hoy en día, gran parte de la
natural
planificación que
resources.
tenemos dice
Therefore,
relación
nowadays,
con poder
most of the
generar
planning that
nuevos
we
polos
have
productivos
is
asociados a
related to be able
innovación
to generate
tecnológica, asociados a nuevas
productive
sinergias, como bien lo
matrices
planteaba,
associated to
que es
new
conocido en todo el
energies.
mundo que
I've
Magallanes está desarrollando y dando
learned that Magallanes is
está
developing
sentando las bases para
and
establecer
setting the grounds
una potente industria del
to
hidrógeno verde,
establish
y para aquello también es necesario hacer una
a
serie
powerful industry of green hydrogen. And for those who know
incluso
this,
en la
it's also necessary
planificación que
to do a
pudiésemos haber
series of
tenido
adjustments
hace 5 o 6
in the
años.
resources and the
Ustedes se pueden
planning
a
that we
pensar
could have
hace 5 o
had
6 años,
maybe
el hidrógeno verde
5 or 6
todavía no era un
years
tema
ago. If
tan
you think
relevante
about
a nivel
this,
mundial
6 years
ni
ago,
a
green
nivel país, por
hydrogen
lo
wasn't
tanto,
as relevant
quería
worldwide or
también
at country
transmitir ese
level.
mensaje respecto
Therefore,
de
I
poder
wanted to
tener
also transmit
políticas
this message
públicas
about being able
públicas
to
que
have
sean
public
dinámicas,
policies
planificaciones
that are
territoriales que
dynamic,
tengan
territorial
cierta
planning that
capacidad de
has
adaptarse a los nuevos
a
desafíos que
certain
van apareciendo
adaptation
en todos los
capacity to
territorios
the
y
new
que
challenges that
efectivamente
come up
pueden
on
responder
all the
a nuevos
territories,
mercados emergentes o también
that
a
can respond to
situaciones
new emerging
contingentes,
markets
como bien
or
decía Juan
contingent
hace un momento.
situations, as Juan was
Finalmente,
saying.
mencionar que, como bien mencioné,
Finally, I wanted to
nosotros hemos
mention
puesto el foco
that
en la
we've put a
planificación de los
focus
territorios
on
en
the
base a dos
planning
cosas.
of the
Una,
territories based on two
establecimiento de
things.
convenios de
One,
programación, es
establishing
decir, con carteras
programming
de proyectos
agreements,
importantes
meaning with
con nuestros
important
pares
projects
o con nuestros
with our
sectores
peers
de los
or our
gobiernos centrales,
sectors
como por así
of the
decirlo,
central
obras
government,
públicas, Ministerio de
like
Vivienda,
Public
Salud,
Works,
Educación,
Ministry of
etcétera,
Housing,
para
Health,
establecer carteras
Education,
que vayan
etc., to be
en
able to
foco a lo que
establish
nosotros establecemos dentro de
portfolios that
nuestra
are focused
planificación
on what
territorial.
we establish
Y en
within our territorial
segundo,
planning. And
y en
second,
segunda parte, algo muy importante que nosotros
one
como
thing that's
región hemos
very important that
impulsado
we as a region have driven,
y que el año 2022 se materializó en
and in
una política por
2022 it
parte
was
del actual
materialized
presidente
into
Gabriel
a
Boric,
policy by
es
the current
que se logró
president, Gabriel
establecer
Boric,
una política
where
de
we were
zonas
able to
extremas,
establish
es
a
decir, un
policy of
apoyo
extreme
adicional
zones,
a las
meaning
zonas que
an
por
additional
su
support
lejanía
to the
del centro del
areas
país, por
that
su
being them
brechas
far from the
territoriales y
center of the
sociales,
country and the territorial
necesitaban poder
gaps,
tener un aporte mayor de
they needed
recursos.
to have a
Entonces,
greater
esta
contribution of
política ha sido
resources.
una
So
política
this
sumamente exitosa en Chile,
policy has
especialmente en la
been
región
very
de Magallanes,
successful in Chile,
dado que nos
especially in the
permite
region of
invertir
Magallanes,
montos
because it allows us to
importantes
invest
en
amounts that are
infraestructura
important in
pública
infrastructure
habilitante para diferentes
that
sectores,
is enabling
pero
public infrastructure for different
teniendo
sectors,
una
but
metodología de evaluación
having a
diferente a la
methodology
tradicional
for
que
evaluation
tienen
that is different to
los
the
ministerios
traditional one
competentes
that
para, en el
the
fondo,
relevant
en este caso el
ministries
Ministerio de
have,
Hacienda, para poder
in this case, the
localizar
Ministry of
recursos en nuestra
Treasury, to
región.
be able
Por lo
to
tanto, ahí hay un trabajo
localize this in
intersectorial
our
que es
region.
vital,
Therefore,
diría
there's
yo, en
intersectoral
donde
work that
como
is vital,
región
I'd
de
say,
Magallanes y
whereas
Antártica
a
chilena,
region of
nosotros
Magallanes
tenemos
and the
que,
Chilean
y
Antarctica,
hemos
we
sido exitosos en
have
lograr
to
transmitir nuestras
and have been
necesidades a los
successful
gobiernos centrales,
in being able to
y
transmit our
esto
needs to
tiene
the
la
central
fortaleza de
government.
tener
And
un
this
foco
has the
muy
strength
importante a
of
nivel
having
regional, a nivel de
a
comunas
lot of
con
importance
nuestros alcaldes.
regionally
De hecho,
in the
solamente para
communes with
terminar,
our
mencionar que
mayors.
este ejercicio
Just to
de
close, I
poder
want to
generar
mention that
una
this
política de
exercise,
zonas extremas
being
que
able
se
to generate
materializa
a
en un
policy in
plan de
extreme
desarrollo de
zones
zonas extremas
that is
con más de
materialized in
100
a
iniciativas
development plan of extreme
son
zones
cerca de
with over 100
2.400
initiatives
millones de
that are
dólares,
close to
genera en una planificación a 10
$2,400
años,
million
genera
is generates in
las
the
bases
10-year
de todo el
in the planning
desarrollo
that sets the
potencial de
basis
nuestra
for all
región,
the development, the
por lo
potential
menos lo que
development
tiene que ver con los
of our
aportes
region,
públicos
and at least
y
everything
también que
related
estos
to
aportes han sido
the
conversados, que
contributions
nacen
and
desde los gobiernos comunales, municipios, y también con una vinculación
these
fuerte
contributions
con
that
los
we had
principales
mentioned,
sectores productivos
and
privados
also with
a
a
través
strong
de una
link to the main
gobernanza que hemos
private
logrado
productive
crear
sectors
con la
through a
Corporación de
governance that we have
Fomento
been able to
Industrias
create
de nuestro país,
with the
en donde
development
convergen en
corporation
un
that industry
ecosistema
with industries in our country
único,
where
tanto públicos como
it
privados, para
converge
poder en el fondo
into
construir
a
una hoja de
unique
ruta,
ecosystem,
entre
both
otras
public and
cosas,
private, to be able to
para poder
build
generar
a
infraestructura
roadmap,
habilitante, por
among
ejemplo,
other
para la industria
things,
del hidrógeno verde o para la
to
industria de
be
las
able
telecomunicaciones
to
y
generate this
etcétera en el pasado.
infrastructure. For
También
example, in the green hydrogen
para nuestra
industry,
proyección hacia el territorio antártico.
and also for
Eso
our
principalmente,
projection
María Camila.
Muchas
towards
gracias,
our future.
Axel.
Thank you so much,
Muchos
Axel.
elementos muy
There's a
interesantes
lot of
en
very
esta
interesting
estrategia
elements in
que
this
ustedes están
strategy
desarrollando
that you
también
are
en
developing
Magallanes. Creo
also.
que nos hemos quedado con la importancia
I think
de
we
coordinar,
have
de
considered
integrar
the
la
importance of
planeación con la
coordinating and
innovación,
integrating the planning and
con la
innovation
formación para
with
el
training
trabajo,
for
con la
work,
necesidad de
with the
coordinar
need
con los
to
vecinos,
coordinate
con
with our
la
neighbors,
coordinación con los diferentes niveles de
with the
gobierno, con la
coordination with the
importancia que
different levels
tiene
of
el tener
government, with the
instrumentos
importance
flexibles
of having
para
flexible
poder planear y
instruments
poder
to
ajustar y
be able to
adaptar
plan
a las
and adjust
necesidades
and adapt
que vamos enfrentando.
to
La
the needs that we're facing, the importance of the role of the private sector and the public-private work. I think there's a lot of things that have come up with very concrete examples. As I was saying before, we have shared with you the summary block, the event, the synthesis of the technical document. I would like to thank very specially today's panelists, Florencia, Juan, Axel, our colleagues, Veronica, Blanca, and also Fernando, for being with us today. We invite you to the next seminar where we are going to be talking about citizen safety. This will be held on June 17th so that you can register. And then finally, I want to invite you to be able to do this through the links. We have shared a lot of things through the chat links. I hope they're working and that you can click on them. And then finally, I just want to share the survey that for us, it's very important to see how we can keep improving, how we can give you other experiences and useful information. So I ask you, please, thank you, Karim, for sharing the screen. I ask you, please scan the QR code for the survey. We cannot see it yet. Wait, I think that in the chat, we will share this. Meanwhile, the bank's YouTube channel also, there, we have the survey there. The bank's YouTube channel where we will be sharing the recording of today's seminar and the document, the synthesis document, and the blog that we were mentioning. We really thank you so much. We ask you to please scan as a final effort, scan this so you can do the assessment and evaluation of today's seminar. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great day and a great week. Thank you so much.
Buenas tardes, que esté muy bien a todos. Saludos. Gracias por la
Gracias por
invitación.
todo. Hasta la próxima.